The spin-off. There's a word that typically causes a negative reaction in people's minds. Oftentimes they're mediocre and quickly forgotten. The spin-off, not the people. Like Golden Palace. Other times they're absolute disasters like Baywatch Nights. Occasionally they're well received, but they can't find a proper audience like The Ropers. Yet on rare occasions they surpass their parent like NCIS. This happens in RPGs. Alternity was followed by Aberrant. Twilight 2000 begat 2300 AD, and the success of Dark Heresy gave birth to Rogue Trader. Then D20 Modern was born as a spin-off, not from D&D rules, but from Star Wars D20. It became known as Wizards' D20 generic system, but is that a fair comparison? I'm Mr. Welch, and today's Mad Musings is about to get real. D20 Modern was created in 2002 by Bill Slavichek for WotC, with writing credits also given to Jeff Grubb, Rich Redmond, and Charles Ryan. It was released shortly after D&D 3.0 and has gotten a lot of core mechanics that players of 3rd edition will recognize. But it wasn't just D&D with guns. It was a hybrid design taking parts of Star Wars D20 and the D&D rules and merging them into a game that could initially be used to play in mundane worlds without any magic. This being Wizards of the Coast, that idea lasted until Chapter 10. It took a large amount of ideas from Alternity, the failed sci-fi horror RPG I've covered previously, going so far as to convert the dark matter setting to modern. The first major change to the game was the class system. Races were gone, at least for the initial book. Everyone was human. Fantasy races weren't imported over until the next book, Urban Arcana. Classes were broken down into 6 options, each one representing a different ability. You had strong, fast, tough, smart, determined, and charismatic heroes. These gave you all your primary abilities, and unlike other D20 classes, they were meant to be mixed and matched with other basic classes or advanced classes. As such, the basic classes only went to level 10, while the advancement charts kept going until level 20. Advanced classes were similar to prestige classes, only designed to be taken relatively early. You get actual prestige classes in later books. The core rules were a mix of D&D and Star Wars. Armor class was replaced by a defensive bonus, as armor is rare in most cases. So this ability was primarily increased by classes, feats, and basic abilities. The D20 skill system was retained, meaning many skills were closed off to characters if they didn't select the right class or occupation. The action point system was taken from Alternity. These were a finite number of points you could spend to gain a bonus to die rolls or to activate certain feats. You had a decent number of them, but they didn't refresh until you leveled up. The action point system also increased as you leveled up, so a low-level character will only get a 1d6 bonus by spending one. At higher levels, they added 3d6 to your total. Alignment was reskinned to allegiance, determining how a character would react in a specific situation. It helped players keep their characters tied to a consistent attitude, preventing certain players from just going off the rails anytime they wanted to watch the world burn. You picked a number of traits or allegiances, and when you had a moral dilemma, you would determine how your character would react by the order they were written down. Your cybernetic police officer would protect the public trust, first and foremost. Then if that was done, then they would protect the innocent, and finally they would uphold the law. But before they could do any of that, they first had to make sure that they weren't trying to arrest a senior member of the OCP board. Every character started with an occupation, which was similar to a background in 5th edition. Occupations had prerequisites, but this was usually just the starting age of the character, so you couldn't play Doogie Howser Teenage MD. Okay, age was the only prerequisite except for the athletic class. Occupations gave you class skills, bonus feats, and a wealth modifier. It did create an inevitable breakdown in rules versus setting, because some obvious starting jobs, like soldier, was an advanced class, while jobs that required years of experience, like doctor, could be taken at level 1. And don't think players didn't notice this. Other mechanics cribbed from different systems was the reputation and wealth ratings. These were simplified for ease of play. Reputation didn't see much use in most situations. It determined if a player got a penalty or bonus on certain social skills. The DM rolled a d20, plus the reputation bonus of the character, against a difficulty class 25, and if successful, the player got a +4 or -4 bonus on a social check, depending on if the reputation was helpful or harmful in that situation. For wealth, it was simple. Add your wealth roll to a d20, and if you rolled over the target number of what you were trying to buy, you could afford it. It kept record keeping to a minimum, at least as far as consistently having to rewrite your character sheet because of your never-ending flux of pocket change. Most of the other D20 rules were lifted straight from 3rd edition D&D. The saving throws are the same, with reflex, fortitude, and will making their triumphant return. It's a D20 system, so there will be feats. Again, mostly cut and paste from the player's handbook. You've got the base attack bonus, but it's only a standard chart for all characters. So fast characters with a katana will have the same number of regular attacks as a college lecturer of the same level. Hit points are the same, with hit dice ranging from D6 to D10. Run out of hit points and start dying. If you've played D20 games, especially during the dark ages known as the Glut, it's easy to understand D20 Modern. The core rules give you everything you need to play a D20 game without magic or any other supernatural element. But this is a Wizards product, so you know that's not going to last. After telling us you can play any world possible and you don't need to make this D&D with guns, you get to Chapter 9, where psychics and wizards abound. This does make sense in context, as D20 Modern was initially proposed as a pair of urban fantasy games called Shadow Chasers and then Urban Arcana. The latter would be the very next book in the D20 line. Wizards, psychics, and the like became advanced classes in D20 Modern, with many spells, again, cut and paste from the player's handbook like everything else. No official settings are presented in Modern as actual settings, but a few were suggested. And wouldn't you know it, Shadow Chasers was the first one. Slavacek got his games after all, even if he did have to change the names. And Urban Arcana was the book that won the audience over on D20 Modern. It introduced the fantasy races, added magic, monsters, and not a few comparisons to Shadowrun. When the cover art is Drow gangbangers, you know exactly what you're getting. If you ever wanted to see what Mystara was like in 1991 AC, this is the book that would show you. Granted, a massive chunk of this book was cribbed word for word from the player's handbook, but that's what the players wanted. It does bring back the hated class level adjustments, where you had certain races having to wait for multiple levels to get more hit points, while everybody else lapped them. They even brought back planar tieflings from Planescape with their human appearance, but with something just slightly off about them. They weren't the edgy demon boys we've got now. The Drow are everywhere in this book, as we were still recovering from the grimdark darkness of the grimdark 90s. And though they're described as having jet black skin in text, they have gray skin in all the art, because it's really hard to draw something with a neat detail when your only available color is black with some shading. Personally, I think if we got Urban Arcana as the core book, D20 Modern would have been a match for 3rd edition. It was the right time for it. We were still coming off the high that was the World of Darkness, and the target audience was still there, just younger. When people talk about D20 Modern, they talk about the Null Pimp. Players took real-world elements and spiced them up with fantasy equivalents. The Drow frequently appeared as Yakuza. West Virginia was now Dwarven territory. Many games became Shadowrun with the D20 system. Scientology was run by Mind Flayers, a step up from the real-world equivalent for many people. It gave us a tongue-in-cheek look at society for many tables, and one that was long overdue. There was even supposed to be a TV show on the Sci-Fi Network, but that was killed in production before the cameras even rolled. The supplements were D20 Modern's sword. The main book was just rules cut and paste from D&D with elements of Star Wars and Alternity welded on. These supplements, both rules and settings, kept the game alive years past the death of 3rd edition. That alone tells you how strong the game was. It was only a temporary reprieve, but this was a Hasbro company. If it wasn't selling, it wasn't getting made. There was decent support in terms of books for Modern, didn't flood the shelves like 3.5 or 4th would later, but players weren't starved for attention either. All told, there were 10 additional source books over 3 years, so averaging every 4 months. Not weekly like 3rd edition, but far more loved than most secondary titles. The game had 2 other books that were considered its core products, the Menace Manual and the Weapons Locker. The Weapons Locker is just that, a list of guns. It would not have been out of place in a GDW system, except it didn't have near enough guns for any self-respecting GDW player. With only a meager 190 pages of wall-to-wall boomsticks, you can see why Twilight 2000 fans consider this book a nice, bare-bones starter to RPG firearms. The Menace Manual, on the other hand, is considered one of the best products Wizards has ever created. Unlike other D20 books, this just isn't cut and paste of 3rd edition. It takes heavily from Star Frontiers, Alternity, Modern Legends, a few Lovecraftian public domain horrors, and only a few Dungeons & Dragons monsters. It does have links to the Mask of the Red Death setting, but other than that, it tries to be its own game. There's even extensive rules on the drop bear, so remember to wear your pickle haba, people. That did more to help it shake the D&D with guns image for a lot of people. Modern expanded with D20 Future and its sister products, Future Tech and Cyberspace, to turn the game into D&D with laser guns. These books brought back Alternity, which was also a Slavacek creation, so that was to be expected. It also presented new takes on Star Frontiers and even brought back Bug Hunters from the failed Amazing Engine line in the dying days of TSR. Unfortunately, these were released while retailers were still getting over the glut, meaning people hesitated to pick these titles up, considering they were a supplement rather than an actual rulebook. There was even a post-apocalyptic setting book, but it too suffered the same fate. Modern lived long past its due date because it was given its own system reference document, which told people how they too could write D20 Modern products by following specific rules on what was allowed to be in their books. At first, this was a bit of a curse because third-party D20 books had been pushed out in such large numbers that they had flooded retailer shelves. Good books were lost in the vast sea of mass-produced crap that gave us that dark period its name. A few D20 modern third-party titles did stick out, like a version of Gamma World by Sword and Sorcery, and Green Ronin fully embraced modern for a game line. The modern SRD is still active, and thousands of supplements are still available on Jari through RPG. Again, the quality varies greatly, but it's a second-tier RPG that was abandoned, and years later is still getting large-scale support, such as the game Night by Armored Gaming that was added 2 days ago as of the recording of this video. There's over 2,000 supplements currently available for sale as I speak. Getting printout of the core books is as simple as ordering them online. Many of them are still print on demand. That's D20 Modern. It's a generic system cribbing most of its notes from previous games of the writers and designers. It's scratched an itch for many players, and because of that, it got legs few other games have earned. If you want a good generic system with a bit of math, but not too much, it's an option. Next up is a book that was sent to me for review by multiple people, and a Kickstarter darling, Shadow Dark. Does it live up to the hype, or is it going to be lost in a sea of OSR titles? Tune in next time as I try to clear my own glut of reviews. But until then, I don't believe in modern love.